In the news of the day, they say that the court is currently preparing 236 trials against the use of the drug due to its side effects and that it caused the lives of people to be affected. However, the inventor doctors they will not be sued. They also say that they are still looking for a cure for the bloodivores. At that moment, it is seen how Mei Liu is next to Wen Chao and complains since the government does not care what happens to the affected people, but rather they only want the cure for the virus. Following that, the people around him start screaming as a bloodiver is attacking a woman. However, the attack didn't last long as the Bureau of Special Threat arrived just in time. Then Angie is seen arriving, and Mei Liu leaves with her. Wen Chao decides to follow them. Wen Chao throws a bag at a man, at which point he asks him to fill it with money, but he refuses. On the other hand, Mei Liu is trying to hack the bank system so she can reset it and steal the money. Although the banker tells him that it will be impossible for him to do so, Mei Liu simply tells him that he does not like the word impossible. He then looks like Angie is disarming the bank's alarm. They finally manage to open the money vault, and Mei Liu calls Chen Feng to get ready and go pick them up. Minutes later, the banker tries to persuade Wen Chao by telling him that if they need money to buy blood, he will help them, but Wen Chao gets angry and starts beating him. After having collected all the money, they escape from the bank. While escaping, a boy manages to see Wen Chao's face and killing him is his only option, but Angie refuses, until Mei Liu throws himself at Wen Chao to stop him from shooting. Just then, Angie's DGPS lights up, which means the police will coming. Chao refuses to let Angie go with them, because once the DGPS is triggered, they'll track her no matter where she runs. However, Mei Liu ignores him and escapes with Angie in the car, leaving Wen Chao and Chen Feng alone. Mei Liu is driving fast while listening to loud music. On the other hand, he is being followed by the police. However, he ignores them and even causes one of the police cars to have an accident. At one point, he asks Angie if the music is okay, but she remains silent. He assures her that nothing to be worried about and everything will be fine, but at that moment, they start shooting, so Mei Liu protects Angie and decides to take another street, going to a tunnel. Once inside the tunnel, Mei Liu hands Angie a bag full of money and flash grenades for her to throw them before the police approach. Once the grenade is thrown, the cars crash and they manage to escape. However, as they exit the tunnel, a Bureau of Special Threat tank prevents them from passing, and they were caught. At the police station, Mei Liu is being interrogated because he is charged with forgery, interfering with public duties, violating traffic regulations, and accused of controlling weapons. When asked why he robbed a bank, he simply replies that he went out for a walk with his friends. At that moment, Wen Chao appears angry and begins to yell at him that he is a traitor. When they offer to talk to him, Mei Liu refuses since she has nothing to say to him. Following that, Mei Liu learns that 15 people have died in the bank. However, they had left them alive. Days later, at the trial, they all meet, and Mei Liu begins to think about who could have killed them all. According to him, Angie couldn't have been since she left with him. Chen Feng was waiting for them outside all that time, and Wen Chao couldn't have been due to his poor intelligence. At that moment, the judge enters and gives the verdict. Everyone is sentenced to death. Wen Chao starts crying and yelling that he hasn't killed anyone. However, no one listens to him and the BST takes him away. While Mei Liu is being taken to prison, he meets the director of the BST, who is also his father, Tenju. As they talk, Tenju mentions Liu's mother, causing Liu to get angry and pin Liu's father against the wall. After that, Tenju tells Liu that they are no longer father and son. Finally, everyone is taken to a place far from the city inside the BST's van. When they are isolated, they start shooting at them. Tenju, who introduces himself as the president of the BST. Following that, he reports that the research and project he has been working on has ended. At that moment, 5-year-old Mei Liu appears with her mother Shimin Guqing. Then she explains that her son is half vampire human, causing a commotion in the public. The journalists start taking an endless amount of photos until finally, Mei Liu wakes up from the dream, totally dazed and all sweaty. When Mei Liu looks around him, he has no idea where he is and who are the people next to him. Mei Liu continues to look around and sees there is a backpack, which contains all her belongings and even a weapon. When she looks at the rest, she realizes that they have similar things. Following that, he decides to check his backpacks to find out who they are, but at that moment, the red-haired young man attacks him. Then the young woman wakes up scared and begins to wonder why she is alive. Suddenly, Mei Liu remembers the moment when they were being shot at. The young man with red hair begins to undress and put on the clothes he used to wear, and then he asks them the name of each one and the reason why they are in prison. Mei Liu is the first to introducing herself and mentioning that he is there due to robbery. The young woman introduces herself as Cho Ifan and was taken into custody due to financial fraud. Finally, the red-haired young man introduces himself as Shin, a professional assassin. A strange noise begins to sound, leaving them totally in shock, but then it stops and the door in the cell begin to open. All the vampires start to come out of their cells, and Milieu thinks while watching that it might be a special concentration camp for bloodivores. Suddenly, an alarm starts to sound in a woman, and Angie appears and explains that they are in Aori, and that this will be the place where they will live for the rest of their lives. Suddenly behind Milieu, a cloaked woman appears and says that she is the real Angie. A prisoner approaches the woman and begins to undress her. Followed by that, Chen Fong appears and kicks the prisoner's face, since he believes that this woman is Angie. Milieu tries to stop him, but another prisoner stops him and starts being pointed at with a gun, but Wen Chao appears and starts yelling at him as he wants to know what happened in the bank. The DGPS of Chen Fong and the prisoner who is fighting him is activated. As he continues to be beaten, the prisoner's DGPS reaches 0, and his head is kaboom, causing fear in the rest of the vampires. The strange woman explains that their necklaces now contain explosives and have been placed so that they don't kill each other. Everyone begins to approach her in order to kill her, but Chen Fong prevents them. After her, Milieu yells that this woman is not Angie, leaving Chen Fong totally stunned. On the other hand, the detective is looking at the van where they started shooting Milieu and her friends. He's trying to find the person who did that, since they weren't supposed to be killed yet. Then he receives a call, and while he was talking, he asks the other person if he can look up the list of missing or dead prisoners from the last 2 years. The strange woman is killed by a monster. The prisoners begin to shoot the monster, but it is impossible. Suddenly, the monster begins to kill them. Then Shin prepares to fight, while Milieu flees with Angie. Wen Chao sees them running away and decides to follow them. On the other hand, Chen Fong is still in shock seeing the strange woman is a robot. Milieu and Angie keep running, but stop as more monsters have appeared. Cho Ifan is hiding, waiting for someone to help her, while Wen Chao panics and thinks about shooting himself. But after seeing another prisoner did the same thing, he decides to fight. On the other hand, Milieu keeps running, but is stopped by Cho Ifan, who is asking for his help. Just then, a monster appears and Milieu stares at it until his blood skill, Hemomancer, is activated. Milieu is flying in the air due to her blood ability, gravitation, but suddenly, she falls to the ground. She then asks Angie if she is alright, to which she replies that she is, but at that moment, she was about to be attacked by a monster. She thanks to Shin she manages to save herself from her, and he asks her to run. Following that, Shin starts fighting the monster. Meanwhile, the rest of the prisoners are trying to fight other monsters to make some escape, and even set up a bomb. The bomb falls near Chen Fong, which is still in shock and a little confused due to all the monsters. But then he gathers his courage and runs with the bomb towards the entrance, and then throws it, which breaks the entrance. After that, the prisoners begin to flee. On the other hand, Milieu helps Angie to escape from the monster with her blood skill. But as they were about to leave, Cho Ifan asks her for help. Milieu tells Angie to use the gun from his backpack to distract the monster so he can help Ifan. Following that, Milieu heads towards a vent to escape with the girls. At that moment, Milieu manages to see Shin and tells him to wait for him, that he will help him. But he makes a sign with his hand and tells him that he is fine, to leave him. Meanwhile, the rest of the prisoners flee towards the exit, but when they enter, they don't find a way out. Milieu is inside the vent with Angie and Cho Ifan. While they are crawling to a place, Angie proposes to split up, but Milieu and Cho Ifan refuse as it would be dangerous. While they were talking, Cho Ifan asks Milieu if she is a user of the blood skill, which shocks Angie, because she didn't know. Then Milieu asks Angie to pass the gun to her, and starts taking the bullets out of him, and starts throwing each bullet down each path of the vent, until he finally chooses one. He starts thinking a lot of questions, until mentions the fact why that strange woman had the appearance of Angie. More monsters keep attacking the prisoners, until one finally decides to use his blood skill, paralysis, to stop the monsters for a few minutes. Following that, a young man with blonde hair asks the user of the paralysis skill to help him, so he creates a wall. And with his blood skill, he starts moving all the elements that are heavy to cover the door. Finally, Milieu and the girls make it out of the vent and into a room that appears to be an unoccupied office. As they talk, Milieu turns around and suddenly she sees that Angie's clothes are all torn, making him blush. Because of that, Milieu decides to go out and go through other rooms to look for food and things that they can serve. As Milieu goes through things, she finds a blueprint that says building will have to be completed in 2317. However, it is still 2 years away from completion. She keeps looking and realizes that she is in Aori. A memory of Milieu is seen when he was a kid and was playing with Wang Feng. But at that moment, BST policemen begin to arrive, and then his teacher appears, who asks all the students to leave the room since a vampire is attacking the school. Mi Liu wants to go with his classmates, but his teacher tells him to stay in the classroom, since they are orders from his father. Minutes later, the vampire who is attacking the school appears. The girls begin removing their clothing. Cho Ifan then asks what her relationship with Mi Liu. Angie just tells her that they're just friends. But Mi Liu finds himself submerged in memories of him, and then sees Rod holding Mi Liu hostage. The policemen ask him to release him, but he only wants to talk to Tenju. However, Tenju does not show up and sends, via drone, microphone and tape recorder to see and speak with Rod. As they talk, Tenju tells him that even if he is holding Mi Liu hostage, he can do nothing, and before Rod is killed, he throws Mi Liu off the school balcony. Finally, Mi Liu remembers where she is, and at that moment, in the burn that her father left her, a celestial light begins to shine. The detective analyzes what happened to the prisoners and tries to find the reason why they were all declared dead. Searching the BST database, he checks Mi Liu file and analyzes the files of her classmates. Trying to understand why they too were involved, he ends up investigating the orphanage where they all grew up. Meanwhile, Mi Liu along with Angie and Cho Ifan walk the corridors of the strange place where they are. Checking each place carefully, Liu comes to the conclusion that they are in a space where past, present, and future are connected and affect the place. Just then, a monster appears behind Angie's back, and Liu immediately saves them. Elsewhere, the blonde-haired young man continues to use his technique to prevent the huge mountain of accumulated materials from collapsing and giving the monsters space. The rest of the prisoners decide to help him by holding part of the Great Mountain. However, one of the prisoners reaches his limit and decides to commit suicide by exploding a bomb. Chen Fong steps in to prevent the worst. Wen Chao panics and kills the prisoner and cries in desperation for having killed someone. Shen Fong begins to remember his days in the orphanage with Wen Chao and how Wen Chao protected him from being beaten by a group of children. The memory over, Chen Fong sets out to protect his friend, even if it costs him his life. Shen Fong approaches the blonde-haired young man and asks him to create an opening with his technique that will allow him to get out of the large mountain of materials to face the monsters. The young man refuses, considering that the situation is too dangerous and would put everyone in danger. Back at Mi Liu, he has a difficult confrontation with the monster. Angie and Cho Ifan escape, but are stopped by the appearance of another monster. Angie protects Ifan, and she is in charge of finding a room that leads them to another path. Angie slowly walks towards the door, but at that moment, Ifan changes her mind and pushes her. Immediately afterwards, Angie shoots the monster but receives a wound in her abdomen. Cho Ifan runs down the new path, but is unable to proceed when a pile of debris covers the exit. Meanwhile, Mi Liu manages to save Angie from both monsters. Ifan returns and shows Liu the way, but Liu decides to ignore her and continues on another path while he carries Angie. Mi Liu desperately runs but is overwhelmed by the monster's abilities. Elsewhere, Cho Ifan is overwhelmed to discover that she was abandoned by Liu. With nothing to do, Ifan is attacked by the monster. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in this anime, I only covered 1 to 4 episodes.